Hi, everyone. Hey, Amy.
Hey,
Welcome.
Bill. Hey, gang.
Hey, welcome, everyone. Welcome to Pure Presence Live. We're happy to be here with you today. My name is Bill Free, and this is Amy Torres. And this is another live broadcast of Pure Presence Live. And today it was my idea today. I can't, I don't want to put any kind of blame or what have you, because you'll hear why I'm saying this in a minute. But this was my idea to talk about the four top spiritual gifts, and of course I gave a side door and a back door out. I said among hundreds of others, and there's probably countless. But today's program is directed at the top four, or what I consider to be the highest level of spiritual gifts, practices, if you will, on this path of enlightenment and awakening. And I thought it was a cool description of what I think are really awesome gifts that we get to use. And really, when you get in the driver's seat of some of these spiritual gifts that are ours to use and understand, and then watch how they work. There can be a lot of people have top mantras or top workbook lessons from the course, and these are just my four top ideas of awakening, of spiritual gifts in the practice of awakening.
Okay. I'm just gonna check and see if people are coming in. And yeah, the reason that Bill mentions this is that they might not be my top four, but they're beautiful and excellent. And I probably wouldn't even think in those terms of top four. So we're just going to flow and roll, and we'd love to hear yours also. One thing I did share with Bill is that I think it's good to focus on one because it's so easy to get information overload. And one thing that the ego does constantly is say, okay, that's great, but do you have something else that I could do? Over the years, I've had countless students say to me, and do you have something else that I can do? What else can I do? And the question is, are you doing the first thing that you were offered? Have you actually used that practice?
Yeah.
And almost always, the answer is, I did it for 5 minutes, and actually, no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's because there is this energy of easily being distracted from this to this to this to this, so that we are always preoccupied with things that are outside of us, things of like the getting mechanism of the egoic mind. That's really basically it. And that's why, I don't know how many are uh, on this broadcast that, you guys that read, how many books do you have going? I have about eight. I have about eight books going, and I comfortably only need like probably a couple, but I keep a bookmark open, and a book on this part of the house and another bookmark over here, and I'll sit down, I'll open it, and I'll read for a period of time and then close it. And it's just never, it's just never satisfied. I'm never satisfied with just one thing to look at. But it's also that I'm interested in a multiplicity of content. So I really love having my blue book at my nightstand to go to bed at night. I love having my CE edition somewhere else in the house. I like having one of Rupert's books, maybe Joel Goldsmith. So I don't know. It's also variety.
That's interesting to me, Bill, because what popped into my head was appetite versus hunger. So I think that a healthy spiritual appetite, that there's a cycling through, and that each book and each source of wisdom supports the other. and that it confirms the other. Whereas an ego hunger is much more of an ADD, insatiable kind of a feeling. And there comes a sort of frantic, I got to read this, I haven't finished that. So you begin to feel the difference between right cycling through in what I'm going to call a healthy way versus in an addictive way.
Yeah. Well, I would say that when I first found the Course, I was very hungry. I was so hungry. I really wanted to eat the damn book. I really wanted to eat it. And if you could make a meal, I just really wanted to ingest, but it was, I was so like bonked out of my mind over the content. I wanted to drink it in with a fire hose if I possibly could, just because it was like so new and so alive, and it was just so meaningful to me. So in that way, and I also think that there's a sense in where your excitement for this path is required to pull you all fours into it and want nothing more. Have your value so pulled into this content that it's the pearl of great price. It is everything for you.
It's so fun for me that you brought up that initial hunger, which I feel has a different quality than addictive hunger. That is the hunger of the spiritual seeker suddenly coming awake inside, or something like that. And for me, the words that kept coming over and over again when I felt that too was that I was obsessed with God. And I had read Saints Alive by Hilda Charlton. And I believe she talked about being obsessed with God and how she could no longer even go to the movies because she'd be sitting in the theater and just feel like, no, I know what I need to do. And she would just walk with God, go where God sent her. And it was all consuming, but in a healthy way, in a transcendent way. And that sounds to me what you're describing with that initial Course in Miracles hunger.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it wasn't just the Course in Miracles. It was the Bible too. It was when I found the Bible and I was 27 years old. At first, for many years, it was like, oh, Jesus freaks. Oh, here's some more of these Hare Krishna guys or these Jesus freaks. And it was like, and then when I had a desire to, and even when I would watch these Billy Graham crusades and these Christian things where people go up to the front, was kind of freaky, like, what are they doing? But when I actually asked Jesus, and I didn't know really much about him, I did not want to get caught up in one of those crusade things. But when I asked the archetype or the idea of Jesus to come in to this one, I just said, I just want to give my life to Jesus, whatever that means. I want to give it to him, and I want my life to be changed, because I spent the first 27 years, or at least from the age of 13 to 27, alcohol and drugs. And many of my friends died at the end of a drug overdose or something, or became alcoholic. And I had a little girl at the time. She was 2 years old. I wanted to have a new life. And when I asked this Jesus in, all of a sudden something came in with it. And it wasn't like, somebody proselytizing me. Something came in. And it was so it was so powerful that within 3 days of that thing coming in and me asking Jesus to come in, I was on a plane to Jerusalem. I was on a plane to Bethlehem. I wanted to walk where he walked. I was there 5 days later, because the power of interest and the pull was this true? Was it real? I wanted to touch the dirt where this guy Jesus walked. I wanted to see if these buildings were real, or this geography was a real place, or was I just reading about it in a book? So I jumped off the cliff, man, with no parachute, and said, I'm all in on this one. And that same kind of hunger happened to me again when I found the Course, all over again.
And can you tell us a little bit, when you got to Jerusalem, what happened, the actual experience of being in the land, and how long did you stay, Bill?
Well, as a therapist, maybe you'll analyze this behavior a little bit, but this was really interesting. I went to the airport. I had a bunch of tickets for airline tickets on TWA and Eastern Airlines and all these. This was in 1981, and I went to the ticket counter. They were refundable tickets, and it was because I was traveling with my father, doing business deals around the world, mostly from New York City to Miami to the Bahamas. And I went to the ticket counter. I said, I want to go to Israel. And they told me, well, you got to go to Paris first and then Tel Aviv. And so I got my tickets, and I had about $5,000 in cash to my name. I had just loaded up all my belongings. I'd been divorced for a couple of years, and I loaded up all my belongings and had them put in a truck and a car. I had a little sports car. I had put into a truck in Texas and had them ship it to Florida. And then I went to the Bahamas with my little girl, and I ended up having this Jesus experience. So I had $5,000. I put it in a safety deposit box at the hotel I was staying in the Bahamas. And then I found a babysitter for my daughter who would take care of my daughter for a couple of weeks while I left. And I got on a plane. I flew from the Bahamas to Miami. And while I was in Miami, I got this feeling that I wanted to go to Israel on faith. I had the tickets. I had the round trip tickets. I had about $1,000 in my pocket. And I think I had a Sears credit card or something. I didn't have any kind of plastic money except Sears. And I decided to spend the $1,000 at the airport before I got on the plane, because I wanted to go to Jerusalem. I wanted to go to Israel on faith. I wanted to see God take care of me and all of my needs when I got there.
Like Paramahansa Yogananda when he was a teenager. Like Paramahansa Yogananda when he was a teenager. I'm sure many of you have read Autobiography of a Yogi. But I just want to back up a little, Bill, and say it took tremendous faith, at least from my point of view, for you to leave your 2-year-old daughter with a babysitter you didn't know in the Bahamas for 2 whole weeks.
Well, you might think I was a little crazy. I actually did. She was the hotel operator that I had become familiar with. So, and also I was renting a house down the street from her house. So I had become familiar. It wasn't like, hey, will you take care of my kid for 2 weeks? It was more, I knew her better than that. Mm-hmm. I was a single parent. I was a good dad. And I made sure that she was taken care of. And in fact, I gave this woman access to my safe deposit box in case something came up where my daughter needed something while I was gone. So I did have faith, and I trusted this woman with my money also. And that's another story. But I ended up going to Israel. I spent all the money. I had no money in my pocket at all when I got to Tel Aviv, and I flew on TWA Airlines, and my luggage didn't show up from New York. We flew from Miami to New York to Paris and then Tel Aviv, and my luggage didn't show up. So I went to the TWA counter, and they said, "Where will you be staying? And we'll send your luggage on." And I said, "I don't know. I'm just going to go find the tomb where Jesus was laid and sleep outside." Mm-hmm. And they said, "You can't do that. it's not safe and it's cold up there. And I said, you need to be in a hotel. And I said, well, I don't have any money. And I spent my money in Miami because I'm here on faith. I want to just be here on faith. And so the TWA counter gave me a TWA jacket to wear and $20. And the $20 got me a bus to Jerusalem. So I took a bus to Jerusalem, and I was also fasting. So I wasn't eating. I just wanted to fast and just be in God. It was a total
immersion.
It was a total immersion. And I found my way to Jerusalem, and I was reading the Bible, reading in all the Old Testament stuff and all this kind of spiritual stuff that was blowing my mind. And I found the bus let me off in Jerusalem, and I walked until I found an inn where there was a bed. I had $3 left, and I think it cost me $1.80 to get a bed and blankets. They didn't have heat, and they didn't have electricity. There was candles, and I slept that night, and I got a message internally that I could eat now. And that $1.80 came with breakfast. So they gave me like this kind of bread you dip in oil and like a
kind of like pita bread.
Yeah, hubits. They had hubits and some kind of some kind of a egg that came with it. So that was my first meal, and I went to the tomb, the Sepulchre, or the Holy Sepulchre, and I went to the church of where the manger is, the church building that is over that spot. And I'm looking around, and then I went to the tomb, with the shrine that's over the tomb, where they have all this beautiful artwork from all over the world. And I'm walking around, and I had no money left now again. And this young guy saw me walking into this temple, or this shrine that's over the tomb, that you can walk around and see all this artwork and these beautiful artifacts and things that have been donated. And he watched me walk in, and several hours later, the same young man watched me walk out, and he approached me and he asked me who I was, and he could see that I was American, and I was alone. I was a stranger. And he asked me where I was staying, and I started talking to him about Jesus and about the Bible and all this. And he said, I need to introduce you to my sister who lives in Bethlehem. And I said, well, I don't have any money. And he said, I'll take you there. So he got a taxi cab, this little Mercedes taxi. All the taxis were Mercedes, old Mercedes. And he got me in a Mercedes, and he showed me to where his sister lives in Bethlehem, which was right down the street from the manger tomb, and 37 Bethlehem Street or something. I knocked on the door. They invited me in. I stayed there for 2 weeks. They introduced me to all of their friends around Bethlehem, and they took me to church in Jerusalem. And then 2 weeks later, I got my return flight back home. It was quite a pilgrimage.
And how long did it take you once back home to process? Could you put into words how you were changed or undone?
I was undone immediately. I was snorting cocaine the day before. I was smoking cigarettes the day before. When I asked Jesus to come in and I took the baptism of what I called the baptism of the Holy Spirit, I came out of the water of the baptism. I came out of the sea. I threw my cigarettes down. I never took drugs again. And I smoked pot a couple of times and said, I don't do that anymore. And this was, after 14 years of saying, am I going to do this my whole life? is this my lifestyle, this drug addiction, or this party mentality? So that one moment erased everything. I didn't go to AA, and I love AA, but I didn't need to. I had the AA experience of I'm a all in. I had the AI experience.
The all in, the AI experience, not artificial intelligence, all in. Right. Now, Bill, I'm just going to touch on how you recently had knee surgery. And, you've mentioned that you took painkillers. You have to when you have a surgery like that, which, by the way, my little Smudges just had a hip surgery, my cat. And I thought of you, it's a joint surgery and he's on cat painkillers. He's doing really well, by the way.
Oh, good.
Now, Rupert talks about the residue of, you can have an awakening experience and yet you still have ego residue to deal with, beliefs, interpretations, conditionings. And I remember you sharing with us that when you were taking the pain meds for the knee surgery, that there were these little flickers of, maybe I'm going to enjoy this med. And then there would be like, nah. And I think that's a good example of residue. Do you think that that's an example of what Rupert was referring to?
Yeah, I do. I think that we all have a temptation to slip wherever we would be wherever we would be tempted, wherever
our Achilles heel is. Because didn't you go like 20 years without, totally sober, and then the knee surgery just kind of just triggered a little residue? Because I want folks to know that it's normal and you don't have to freak out, that residue may kind of bubble up, and, you can watch it. You can watch with some degree of detachment and just say, little ego residue.
If you have been addicted before, and I've been addicted to several things since I was 19 years old, alcohol first, then drugs. I was a weekend druggie, but always it was every weekend, and then it was in the middle of the week, and then it was okay. When am I going to stop this? And it comes a time when I don't know. I just didn't want that stuff owning me, and I saw with the ability to put it all down and not pick it up for over 20 years. It gave me, that's a long time to not do it. But I also know that when you go under, when you're getting ready to get surgery, I love that feeling. I love that feeling of, it's like,
I love your candor. I love that you're willing to say that and just let folks know, that can be there,
Yeah. I just love it. When I went for surgery on both knees, I couldn't wait to go under because I love the experience of going, it was just, but I also know this one. I also know the addictive behavior of this one. And when I had my right knee replaced 2 years ago, I got hooked on the pills. I got hooked on the drugs and I let the doctor be the bad guy, because he would say, Bill, take the drugs and bend and push, or I'm going to have to go back in and do surgery again. Mm. And so I was using him as my scapegoat to eat more pills. And then all of a sudden I'm just getting high. I'm getting high all the time. Lisa didn't know I was getting high. She didn't know that I was and I was eating 10 of these pills a day. It was like, I just wanted to be high. And finally I realized, oh my God, I'm hooked on these suckers. And it was 3 months later, I've got to have a pill to get up in the morning, or I got nothing. Or I'm hurting 5 hours later. And it has nothing to do with the pain in the knee. It's the pain that's all over the body because the drugs aren't getting taken. So I did have a re-addiction to the drugs. And my re-addiction, when I realized it, I was teaching a Course in Miracles group one morning here in New Hampshire, and I was teaching workbook lesson 91, that says miracles are seen in the light. And in that, Jesus invites you to go within and then have a mantra that I am not weak but strong. I am not, I'm not addicted, but I am invulnerable, or whatever. And I was actually facilitating that workbook lesson, and I told everyone in the class, there's about 35, 40 people in the class, and I said, you guys, I'm just going to be very honest with you this morning. You are looking at someone who is addicted, who is hooked on these little pills, these oxycodones. I've been taking them for 3 months, and I'm hooked on these suckers, and I'm going to use this workbook lesson to get off of them. Mm-hmm. And I was just very, I just told everyone like it is. And that was the first. Lisa was in the front row. That was the first she heard about it or knew about it, was when she heard me telling everyone else about it. Mm-hmm. And I went home that day after sharing from that place and actually doing the workbook lesson, Miracles Are Seen in the Light, accessing that power and that experience that's offered to us in the course, brought me in touch with the presence, with the Holy Spirit, with my higher self experience of seeing. And when I got home, I poured all the pills in the toilet, and I went cold turkey for a week. It was the most suffering thing I have done in my adult life. I was balled up in a ball. I couldn't sleep in the same bed with Lisa. I had to go downstairs in the guest room and sleep because I was just wrenching all night. I was eating lots of ibuprofen and Tylenols, and I went cold turkey, and just said, those things can't own me. And then I came off of them. Yeah.
Wow.
This was a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm. And then
2 years ago.
And then you did it differently with this surgery. Yes.
This one, I did it completely different. I measured, I actually overdosed.
Just so folks know. So the right knee was 2 years ago, and then the left knee was this past February. Is that
November?
November.
It was November. And this is interesting too. I mean, I didn't know we're going to go into this thing.
But it's interesting. It is interesting. Just to free flow and not have to be attached to any particular subject. Yeah. It's fascinating to hear your progression through this whole thing.
Well, this one, I went to live at Vicky Poppy's house because the surgery was taking place where Lisa was going to Denmark to teach for a few weeks. So I went into surgery, and then the day after I got out of surgery, she went to Denmark and I went to Vicky Poppy's.
Oh yeah. This was right after the Rupert Spira retreat.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And that very week that I went to Vicky Poppy's, I had a full on overdose. I had a full pill overdose. And the nurse who came to Vicky's to keep an eye on me called the ambulance and had me taken to an ambulance come to Vicky Poppy's and pick me up out of bed and take me for overdose.
Did you have a near-death experience?
They said I almost died. I didn't know it. I was just happy. I was just in this total. But what was funny was that I was taking the prescribed amount. I didn't eat too many. The body couldn't take the amount of drugs that was prescribed to it, and it started to shut down. And when the physical therapist came to work on my knee one morning, he saw that I was just about out of it. I had very low pulse. He called the nurse. The nurse came, called the ambulance.
So 2 years before, you were able to pop 10 pills a day. And 2 years later, your system was cleaner or something, and you didn't have the same level of tolerance.
Right. And also, it was they give you a lot of drugs to go home, lots of them. And I was taking the drugs. In fact, they thought I had taken too many, but when they saw what I had taken the right amount. It was just too many.
Wow.
But on the second go around, I weaned myself off of those things in about a month. I took 6 a day, then I took 5 for about 3 or 4 days, then I took 5 a day for 3 or 4 days, then 4 a day, then 3 a day, then 2 a day, and then none.
Mm-hmm.
And I got off of them. I was off of them in 6 weeks.
Well, I find it a reassuring story because issues that we think have been totally resolved can reappear later in life. This is something I've experienced personally and worked with many people who have felt very discouraged, as I did, having an issue blossom up when I thought it was done. But then to hear how you moved through it and the different feelings around it and the different outcome, and for me too, it can actually be auspicious that we've pulled out most of the weed and then we're strong enough and mature enough that later in life we can go back and get the very bottom roots of that weed, that conditioning, that vasana that has been following us for lifetime after lifetime. And the way that you can tell is to ask yourself, is this a choice to take this prescription drug, for instance? Am I just following doctor's orders? Or is this a compulsion? Is there a little charge on it, that's more than just a choice? And you can tell whether you're in a compulsion, because even when you're saying to yourself, I'm not going to do this anymore, something in you is like, oh, yes, I am. And there's a very well-known story about the sage Nisargadatta Maharaj, where one of his devotees gives him a hard time about smoking cigarettes. I think he's a chain smoker and loves to smoke, and he's smoked his whole life, and he's an old man now. And his devotee says something to him like, I notice you really love those cigarettes. And Nisargadatta says back to him, I notice that you really don't love the idea that I smoke cigarettes. And that's it. Because it is possible to be a chain smoker with detachment. I don't know that level, but, I don't believe that that's what he died of. I'm not sure. So,
yeah.
It's just for each of us personally to notice whether something is a choice or a compulsion, and whether it's been with us before and gone away for a long time and come back, and rather than be discouraged, to explore that. And then what you did was you exposed yourself to the congregation and you brought your darkness to the light. And that's what people do with Mooji all the time. They say, I'd like to expose this. Yep. I've been hiding, this or that. That's what people do in psychotherapy. Yep. So I think it's a very worthwhile story for people to hear, Bill.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You kind of touched on something, and I'll give you my version of what happened when on the second go around. The first go around, man, I was just anything goes. I took those pills. I was getting high, and then it was just, it owned me. The second go around, before I would take a pill, I would check in with myself and I would say, is there pain? Am I taking the pill for pain?
Mm-hmm.
And that the desire to take the pill happened 100 times when I checked in that said, there's no pain. I wouldn't take it. 100 times at least. I would get an urge to say, oh, is it time? Oh, yeah, it's time. It's 4 hours. It's time to take a pill. And then I began noticing on the second go around going, okay, is there pain? No pain. I'm not taking a freaking pill. Yeah. And so, what happens, I feel, Amy, that an awakened mind rises above the pull of the residue of the egoic, this addiction, or this this thing that wants to feel better. The awakened mind is what I think is what was accessed when I got off the pills the first time. Workbook lesson 91, I accessed that part of the mind that was awakening and had resolve and said, okay, enough of this. And then the second time, there was a more wisdom being experienced and being exercised, and I had more of a mind of inquiry, where I was inquiring, okay, well, what's this about? Where's this coming from? And that was, I got off the drugs easily the second time. Yeah.
Now I think it may be time for our station break.
It is. I will, I'll load we have a little break. It'll take us about 45 seconds, you guys, and we'll be right back after this station break. Thanks for hanging in. I didn't know it was going to be about Bill's addiction week, but I'm enjoying the dialogue, and thank you, Amy, for bringing it up. We'll be right back.
And check out the chat.
Yep. Okay, I will. This program is brought to you by the Teachers of God Foundation and Amy Torres, ACIM.com. Both of these organizations have programs to support you in the transformation and awakening experience. The Teachers of God Foundation has the 40-day program that is free, the Guide to 365, ACIM 365, and Living in Purpose 6-month mastery course. Amy Torres has her well-known Working the Workbook course, her new intuitive course, and she does private sessions by appointment. Thank you for joining with us today on this webinar. And now back to Bill and Amy.
It's great, Bill.
Hi, everyone. We're back.
Hey, we're back. And I've been interacting with Ray and a few other people in the chat. And it's true, Bill, what you said about the addiction arises within the awakened mind, within presence. It's the story on the screen. So when we move our attention to the screen, there's this whole opportunity, this detachment that occurs where even if there is a persistent habit that we don't like, we just don't take it seriously. It can remain. And it just doesn't have the same power. I spoke with Muji about this because I personally have a habit of biting my cuticles. And I have prayed on it. I have given it over. I would prefer not to do it. And yet I'll find my finger in my mouth. And it's not like biting your nails. You guys who know the difference between nail biting and cuticle biting, where you can actually bleed, your fingertip can bleed, and it's a form of self-mutilation. But where I used to be very ashamed of it or hung up on it, after I spoke with Muji, he was just like, it's a vasana, just forget about it. It's a samskara, whatever, it may fall away, it may persist, but if you don't feed it with your attention and concern, it's really nothing.
Yeah.
And I always share these things to encourage people to not be overly concerned with things that on the personal growth level, we would feel like we have to improve and we have to improve. But at some point, when you lose interest in the person, you'll still take care of the person in the basic ways that are healthy, like you would service your car, but you won't be neurotically obsessing about it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean, Bill?
Yeah, I do. I feel that awakening. I don't know what the Maharaja's story was around smoking. He liked to do it. He knew who he was. He knew his identity as the self, and it's very clear. His writing is very clear about that. And he liked to smoke. I like apple pie and ice cream until I don't. or maybe I'm going to love it until the body is just expires. But I choose to want to serve it. I like it to be healthy. I'm 63 years old. I want it to be a healthy, serviceable instrument. So I exercise. I exercise 4, 5, 6 days a week. I do a little floor exercises, and I get on a bicycle to bring my quads and my hamstrings back on my legs so that I can walk, so that the body really is an instrument that can actually be physical, because I like.
And was that did that become more interesting to you because of the knee surgeries? In other words, is that kind of a hidden benefit that if you had not had the knee surgeries, you would not be as attentive to your physical health?
Probably not. I mean, I don't think I would. I bought a bicycle because I realized that if I don't build my leg muscles back up, I can't walk very well. And the new knees are depending on the leg muscles to come back to support the body, because the knee joints themselves, they can't support the body. The muscles are necessary to move,
and the ligaments and tendons. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they need to be strong. They need to be built up. And so when I realized that both of my legs were hurting after knee surgery for an extended period of time, and I didn't want to be taking the pain pills, I started going to the gym and realizing, wow, my legs don't hurt when I exercise, when I get on the bicycle. So I started getting on a spinner, and I started doing the spinner, and I'm going, oh my God, my legs are coming back. Oh my God, look, I'm running up and down the stairs. And I see the value of exercise on the physical body. And when I was in Garrison with Rupert last month, I asked Rupert about exercising. I said, Rupert, what do you exercise? What do you do for exercise? He goes, oh yeah, I just use the Smart app. I just have a little 10-minute. I do the minimal. I want the maximum exercise for the least minimal amount of time and benefits. And so I don't know. He's probably 5 or 10 years younger than I am, and he sees the value of exercising, keeping the body physical, not to an obsession. I don't care. I do care what it looks like. Actually, I don't want to be like this great big thing. I want to fit into my jeans that I wore when I was 30 years old, and I do. Mm-hmm. And I like that experience of being fit.
I think Rupert also enjoys playing squash or something like that.
Cool. Yeah. I think I watched my mother who died, I think, at about 69 years old. My father died at 59. They didn't need to die. They let their bodies go, and they died because they didn't pay attention to the physical, what's going on. And I'm not obsessed with it. I eat whatever I want to eat. I love bacon. I love hamburgers. I love vegetarian food. I love cheese, but I don't eat like compulsively. I don't eat addictively. I just sort of check in. Okay, are we hungry? Yeah, we're hungry. Let's eat. And that's the way I roll. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is Ray saying? Well, the body is like a little bag of minor addictions, which may or may not be due to behavioral patterns, growing up, or even genetic idiosyncrasies. Yeah, it is. But also the body isn't in charge, and even the mind isn't in charge. So if there's something that, like if I was a smoker, or if I have something that I don't like, that's about my own behavior, I'm willing to just bring the thing I don't like into awareness. Just bring it into an awareness, like the cloud that passes in front of the sky, and let it resolve naturally, not behaviorally. Let it resolve as a matter of it's going to, because I don't think that anyone behaviorally is a trap. A behavior modification is a trap. And there's a fine line between quitting doing something behaviorally and saying, I'm done with that. Because one of them is an absolute decision. And Jesus says in the Course that decision, the power of decision is our one remaining freedom in this world. And so we have the power of decision to tell the mind, look, mind, I'm not doing that anymore. And the mind has to come under that authority.
So I'm just going to have a slightly different point of view there.
Okay.
Which is, to me, the power of decision in A Course in Miracles is only about choosing the ego as our teacher or the Holy Spirit as our teacher. And it has nothing to do with worldly decisions whatsoever. Now, I'm an idealist, so that's just makes it very simple for me. And I've found, for instance, with biting my fingers, that I could decide as much as I like as a person that I don't want to do that. I don't want to bite my fingers. And yet, I might wake up in the middle of the night biting my finger. So if the body is a neutral thing, as A Course in Miracles says, then all that's happening is that the mind, either the ego mind or God mind, is making itself known through the body. And so Ray said here in the chat, in other words, nothing to be too worried about. And I would say, yeah, that's what I've come to, which is that, Ken Wapnick unfairly died of lung cancer, even though he never smoked a cigarette in his life, at 71 years old, when he easily should have lived to be 100. And your parents died young, and we could attribute it to poor habits. But you'll see all kinds of people, like marathon runners will drop dead when they shouldn't. And people who smoke till the end of their days will live to be 85. Who knows why? So in my view, I've just come to feel that we have certain opportunities to exit with death. And that's our time. We may say, yep, this window, I'm taking it, or no, I'm going to wait for the next one. I've kind of learned that we have 2 or 3 opportunities in a lifetime to exit this body and probably reincarnate. We don't know the whole reason why or the whole picture, and it doesn't matter. The ego will tell us, this is fascinating, I want to find out, and that's okay. And beyond that, if we're just undoing and coming all the way back to the screen, then I would just say that our deepest love and understanding would have us maintain the body to some degree. It's just common sense without being unduly concerned about it, as Ray mentioned. And then, hey, Ardith just got here. And Nancy added, doesn't the Course say it is the guilt behind the addiction/behavior that causes us distress? In other words, eat pizza, but don't be guilty about it. Yes. Guilt is the glue that keeps the ego together. So if you are eating pizza and you wish you wouldn't, then if you could really let go of that whole agenda and release the guilt, then you would have used pizza eating for the best possible purpose, to turn your mind to innocence, to choose the Holy Spirit to show you pizza through vision.
Well, I do, I do hear your pushback on that, Amy. And for me, you can say no. For me, you can say no. I'm not doing that. I'm done with that. And I feel that there is extreme authority and power in the decision to say no. And I think that it is the power, like the addictions that this one had with the knees, that was I released myself into the addiction. I released myself into it. I could have said no. And the first time it happened, I just went along, and it was like being unconscious. I just allowed myself to be unconscious and get pulled right into the addiction. The second time, I am not going to do this again. I'm going to be very alert. And, this is why Jesus tells us in the Course, when we do this course, we must be vigilant for the truth. And he even tells us in the workbook lessons, when he says, when you're doing this lesson, if you see that you're distracted because you just don't want to give time to it, go ahead and do your thing and come back when you are ready to be more vigilant about doing the workbook lessons. So he really does bring us to the point of being more serious in our dedication and our vigilance. And for me, because I had an old history of addictive behavior and in alcohol and drugs, I'm much more black and white and saying, okay, no to that, yes to that, no to that. And that's my it's like exercise. I don't always want to exercise, but I got this little ding that goes off in my head and says, exercise.
And Bill, where I'm coming from is that everybody has their particular signature thumbprint, their own life path, and nobody's is exactly the same. So what's true for you and what's true for me is our own truth. And what's true for all of the viewers, your own truth. And we can be truly helpful to each other and not know exactly, what's right for anybody else. And yes. I very much come from that place.
Yes. Well, and I think in the context of the path, the context of what our shared interest is just like you have no guilt, no shame, no blame, no judgment on yourself about the cuticle biting. And I don't either. And I don't have any judgment. I don't have any, when I was taking the drugs, I didn't have any judgment on myself for taking the pills. I didn't have any guilt. There was no guilt. When I was full on into drug addiction, there was no guilt around taking the pills. I just wanted to get high. I just realized that in the noticing, that I was allowing the addiction to be in charge of what the person does, and I said no to that. But it was not a no out of guilt or self-judgment.
I think for me, that's very interesting. I actually love having a very exposed conversation like this. I don't think people talk this way that much. For me, I would say that I still desire to stop biting my cuticles, but the desire is much less, and my attention to the quote unquote problem is much less. So where I've come to in my life is there's this huge freedom around not being ashamed to feel ashamed anymore. If shame comes up in me, I can just look and go, oh, some shame is coming up. And that's huge, huge, because it just moves through and doesn't hook me anymore. And shame is sort of the inner condition, and guilt I see as more the external condition. So, I may be guilty of doing something to another, but the feeling that I hold inside that I'm bad and yucky, that's shame. And that's the thing that humans are driven by the most. That's, what sex addiction is about so much, the shame of hiding that, and, all sorts of things. So I'm very intrigued by shame. And that was a message given me from God in the therapy room with a client. I've told the story before, when I was a young therapist and really still not feeling confident that I should be in that role. And a young client asked me very earnestly, Amy, how did you know when you were well, when you were healthy? And I just went, God, what do I say to this girl? And out of my mouth, I was given the words, when I wasn't ashamed of feeling ashamed anymore.
Yeah.
Even now, it moves me, and to be able to just, and after that, I don't know how long after it was, but clearly that message helped her. It was very liberating, but it was even more so for me. And a while later, I had this incident where I was crossing the street in Manhattan downtown, very busy street full of cars, and my high heel caught in the pants leg. And I fell on my face in the street, and I was surrounded by a circle of people protecting me. And they asked me if I was okay. And I had a twinkle of shame and embarrassment. And then it just went away. And the words came, "It's your turn now." And I realized, oh, I've held my hand out to so many people, and I would never want them to feel embarrassed. And so this one face came in closer to me and said, "Are you okay?" And in the past, I would have been like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine." And this time I just took my time and I said, "I don't know." And he, said, "Can I help you up?" And I said, "Yes." And he gently helped me up. And he said, "May I stand here with you?" And I said, "Yes, thank you very much." And I noticed the other people dispersed because he was my earth angel. And he just gazed in my eyes and he let me just get my bearings and get steady. And then, I said, "I think I'm good." And he said, "You sure?" He took his time. And then I was like, "Thank you so much." And it was just this incredible exchange of gratitude and a complete lesson of receiving is giving and giving is receiving, because he was just reflecting back to me, "You have nothing to be ashamed of. I'm your brother. I love you." And I was loving him. And it was amazing. We must have just lit up that corner, of Broadway and East 4th Street.
How long ago was that?
That was, I'm going to say 15 years ago.
Cool. Yeah, cool. Well, we're running out of time. We have run right past our Peace of God experience, everyone. And in lieu of that, let's just have a quiet time. If everyone would just allow yourselves to just be present, just be in this inner space of the self, of the pure being of presence, of awareness. And we can access this pure presence, the power of being that's really, it's in the quiet place. It's in the stillness. And if anything is disturbing you, any situations in your life of any kind that you would like to just bring into the light, this is the light. This quiet place of being is what Jesus meant many years ago when he said to just go into the closet and pray. And just allow yourself to be in this abiding place, this living of experiencing God, just living and breathing God, because this is what you are. Bring any kind of situation right here into the quiet. And just feel the love that you are is right here. And you can come here anytime. This is your inheritance. as the Christ. And so it is.
And so it is.
Amen.
Amen.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you all for joining with us today. This has been Testimony Day for Bill Free. Thank you for facilitating that, Amy.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining with us, you guys. And we'll be back next week. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Love you guys. Bye.
Bye, Amy.
Bye-bye.